Gosh, I love saying that. Hey, Brent, how are you?
I'm well, sir. How are you doing?
Terrific, thank you. Glad you're here.
Here we go.
Yeah, glad to be here. I thought my friend Joe Boris was going to be here this morning. He said he was going to be on the show as well, but it looks like we're missing that.
No, you're not missing him. He just logged in.
Oh, right on. Great.
Joe's always late, Joe.
Yeah, he's not dead. He's just
Coming to
late.
you live. It's the Auto Hub Show with Ian and Jeff. Here we go.
Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Hi, I'm Kayla Rubenstein, the founder and CEO of a company called Retail Resilient, social selling for the car industry. And we help auto dealers, auto agencies, and vendors in the auto industry sell more cars, service more cars, and make more money using our social selling strategy. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and anything else you can think of. So if you're looking to invest thousands and make millions, we're definitely the social selling company for you. Like I said, who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
I was at Larry Coleman's seminar. So happy I came, having such a good time. Thank you so much, Larry.
One of the best trainers in this area for sure. I don't know about anywhere else, but as far as I know, he's the best. So,
Told you before.
take advantage.
Thank you for having me here.
I'm at Larry Feldman's seminar, and what I found is that what he's really good at doing with his knowledge and with his training, he's not filling a bucket, he's lighting a fire.
Ways to improve. Every month we want to improve better on what we did the month before, maybe the year before. It's about how fast we can get the cars done with quality work to get it to the front line, because that's where we make our money. And the bottom line is the longer it takes, the more money you spend. We want to get it down as low as possible. Right now, like I said, we're in a great stage. We're at 4.5 days. In recon, we want to know how quickly we can get the cars out of the recon process and to the front line. The average days in recon and then the time to line are the most important thing to be looking at. I'm Mike Burrell. I'm Service Director at JM Lexus.
All right. Good morning. It was a little bit hard to find a couple books, so what I did is I found more. There's a lot of books on this topic. If you haven't already seen some, there's a few. I'm just going to change this to this one. All right. So these are a few, and I actually watched a really interesting show about Tesla on the weekend on YouTube about his 10 top inventions, some of which I wasn't familiar with, so I highly recommend that. Electric car conversions, the arrival of the electric car by Chris Johnson. Insane Mode, Real Men Drive Electric Cars, and the Rise and Fall of Detroit's car companies. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm going to start a controversy here because I hear Nikola Tesla's family is suing Elon Musk for stealing his image to use in the logo of the Tesla because apparently he invented that. Just kidding. Our disclaimer, thanks for joining us, is the Auto Hub Show is coming to you, and is the our disclaimer is the views and opinions of shared today are those of our guests and not necessarily those of us, as neither Ian nor I support Tesla, and Brent thinks Tesla rises and falls with the sun every morning. Just kidding about that. And one thing I wanted to mention too, I haven't mentioned our mission statement in a long time. We're looking to improve the business, the automotive business, one show at a time. And hopefully we're getting there, and people like you help make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. And then
I wouldn't say the sun rises and falls on Tesla, but my net worth goes up and down every day.
Yeah, no kidding.
So what the heck do we do with used EVs? And we've got a bunch of great guests on today. And if you are going to upcoming shows, we will be at Used Car Week, and we'll be doing live shows from the event. We've done Used Car Week before. We did San Diego last year. This year it's in Scottsdale. I will be at SEMA with my new camera rig, so I will be there. It's the first time at the show, so I'll be there by myself and my wife, but we'll be doing some stuff from there. I'm not sure on a SodaCon. It may or may not be in the budget this year. But let's get into it. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it depends. Maybe if we can get Tesla to be a sponsor.
Yeah,
Moving right along here. Thank you, everybody. So today is basically another one of our great EV shows with some of our great EV people. And of course, I'm going to introduce each of the people, and someone who is not new to the show, but not too regular with us, Ken Hendricks. Excuse me, Ken, if you could take a moment, introduce yourself. However, answer this question, please, first. Well, after the introduction. I'm encountering, we came up with this show because as a used car dealer, I'm encountering used EVs, and they are becoming a problem because we get them and we immediately go send them off to the dealer to see exactly what the range is, the battery condition is. And Nissan Leafs are kind of notorious for having crummy batteries. But when you've got a vehicle that only has, 40,000 miles on it, 60,000 kilometers, and you've got one of them that we had, gorgeous car, only had 30% of the cells were able to do it, and the range of this vehicle is 18 miles, like just under 30 kilometers. So, who has any use for a car that you can barely go anywhere, and most of the cars are worth less than battery replacement? How are we going to deal with it as they hit the resale market for the second time? Not the first time. The first time, that's that 3-4 year turn, it's okay. But the second time, and as I love what I put in the question, how are we going to deal with it because they don't go nowhere? Ken.
Thank you, Ian and Jeff, for having me back on the show. It's great to be here. And that's a great question, and I'll try to give it a good answer. I'm sure the other panelists will also have some things to say about it. So, Ken Hendricks, and along with my team, spearhead a program called EV Friendly, and we do that through the Automotive Retailers Association. We're located in Vancouver, British Columbia. What EV Friendly is all about is educating industry and consumers about the aftermarket industry. Simply put, aftermarket is anything that happens to that vehicle after it's sold as new, and that will include the aftermarket mechanical, collision repair, towing and recovery, and straight through to recycling. And I'll just give a quick plug as well. EV Friendly will be at the upcoming Fully Charged show in Vancouver, at the Vancouver Convention Center, September 8th through 10th. So if you're around then, you can stop by the show and stop by the booth. We'll have some myself and some experts as well. So with regards to your question, well, as a dealer, the used car dealers are going to be challenged. Let's start with them, and then I'll just touch on the consumers. There are ways of trying to gauge what a state of health is. There are some aftermarket generic tools. They only go so far. You really don't know a true state of health until you actually break open that case and you can test each individual cell. But there are some guides. Recurrent is one of your sponsors, is great for crowdsourcing. The real challenge, of course, is going to be on those trade-ins. Someone has a used EV that they're trading in. You don't have a real quick way of determining that state of health. It's no different than any trade-in. It could have a bad transmission or it could have a bad engine. Well, as a dealer, what do? You take it in on trade. You're taking a little bit of a gamble. If it does turn out to have a really bad battery, you're going to have to make that decision of whether or not you're putting it on the lot or you sell it to somebody else. And that's no different than any ICE vehicle. I think the real trick is educating your salesman. It doesn't mean just because an older Nissan Leaf can only take you 70 or 80 kilometers on a charge, it doesn't mean that you throw that car away. That could be great for a retired person who just needs that car, going down to their local grocery store. Certainly not going to be good if you're an Uber driver or if you have to commute long distances. That's not going to be the car for you. So it's really going to be about educating the salesman and not misrepresenting that vehicle, because that's what's going to get you into hot water. So getting that person in the right vehicle and setting up expectations.
No, that
answers some of it.
No, by all means. And the whole point is to just deal with it because it is scary. And I mean, we did get one. It was very nice. We ended up keeping it. And we had a guy whose daily commute was 25 kilometers, so 16 miles for the Americans each way. And I won't kid you, we made him sign off on that. Please note, fully charged, the range shows this, because I had a fear that he isn't going to make it home if it's raining or there's traffic. But that's not my call. Next, we have Brent EVR, super duper buddy, the king of EVs, the man, the legend, the guy that Elon Musk calls when he says, "What's wrong with my cars?" Brent, please introduce yourself and answer the question. Like, how are we going to deal with this as these things get older?
You know what? Thanks for having me this morning. Pleasure to be back. I think the Nissan. Well, I'm going to drop a bombshell on you. There's nothing wrong with the battery in the Nissan Leaf. There's everything wrong with the way Nissan built that car. Nissan did not build that battery with thermal management. They did not build it to keep the battery within a proper operating range. There's no ethylene glycol circulating around that battery. There's no inline heating and cooling of that battery. So because of that, that battery crapped the bed the same reason that your cell phone craps the bed. And that is there's no active heating or cooling of the battery, and ultimately the battery wears out because it's not kept within an optimal operating range. Tesla's, ID4s, you go down the list, everybody has thermal management except for the Nissan Leaf. And that's why the Nissan Leaf after 3 or 4 years is just a turd, because after 3 or 4 years, so is your cell phone. Other than that, the example that you picked this morning, unfortunately, is the worst possible example for a used EV. And that having been said, like our friend said a moment ago, if you're just looking for something to putz around town, basically, a golf cart, street legal golf cart, to go to the grocery store, fine. A used Nissan Leaf is probably a great car for you. But yeah, point well taken. It's really not a great used EV. But that having been said, most Teslas are. Most batteries will manufacturer error in their battery construction within the 8-year or 10-year warranty period that most manufacturers provide now. And frankly, if you have a 300-mile EV and it's down to 50% after 10 years, you've got a 150-mile car, which is still not bad after 10 years. And also our friends up at Redwood Materials are recycling EV batteries now, as well as several other startups throughout the world. So there's no real problem with end of life. There's no real problem with midlife, and there's no real problem buying a new one, at least a Tesla. But our friend is also correct. Jay Leno is also correct. If you buy anything but a Tesla, you may have a hard time doing a long road trip for the present until everybody's on the NACS.
Perfect. Actually, I just saw Peter's comment there about the LAPD, and they have the i3, that they're almost static display vehicles. So a question before I go on to Joe, because he was late, so we're going to make him wait.
Don't even let me talk. I'm happy in the comments.
No. We got you because you wanted to talk. So Brent, tell me something. So me as a used car dealer, I want to find an affordable overused EV for my customers. What do I look at? Because Tesla, I'm going to tell you something, even though they keep dropping their new car prices, their used are still stupid.
Yeah, and that's a great problem to have if you own one, that's for sure, right? I mean, retained value is one of the things you look for when you buy a car in the first place. I would say a really good cars on the used market. Honestly, the little Fiat 500e. Awesome little car, great little car. Actually, a thermally managed battery for such a small car. I was kind of surprised. The BMW, the i4, great car. Not a bad car at all. Kind of rather not pleasant on the eyes. Kind of looks like a Pontiac Aztek and a shopping cart had a baby. But yeah, other than that, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of great priced used EVs because, frankly, besides the Nissan Leaf, there aren't a whole lot of higher miles used EVs out there. I'd be perfectly comfortable buying a high miles Tesla Model 3 with 95,000 miles on it. You could pick one of those up pretty reasonably. XCare now, my company has battery and drive unit coverage. So we cover the battery and drive unit if you want to get that coverage. So yeah, if you're looking for a good deal on a used EV, get a used EV, put XCare or XCare battery and drive unit on it, and yeah, enjoy the ride.
Well, I got to tell you that not up here in the Great White North are those used Teslas a good value. Even Model S's, 2013 Model S's with 160,000, so 100,000 miles. They're still selling wholesale here for close to $40,000.
Yeah, but that's Canadian. What is that, like $50?
Hey, listen, we're gonna send fires your way, buddy. You better watch it.
I love it.
You know, Peter's comment too. I have to tell you, the other day I went to see Barbie, and it's right. The theater's right next door to a big BMW store, and they had an i3 with a Schnitzer package on it, and it honestly was a sick looking car. But thinking that when I go into my lot, it is literally a 70-mile round trip. I may not want to get that car, would I, Peter? Because charging out where it is isn't too good. But thank you very much for the comment. I saw Barbie surrender a man card. I don't know. You know, I think that Simu Liu, even though he's I guess a decent actor, his dating thing just went way up. Moving right along, next guest we have a self-proclaimed evangelist, Joe Boris, the shy Joe Boris. And Joe, what's your opinion on this? How are we going to deal with this as they hit the resale market and they don't go anywhere?
He's muted.
Joe, you're muted.
Joseph.
Something happened.
Joe, where'd Joe go? Actually, we'll just move right along. We'll get him later. Ian, go for the next question.
Yeah, ICE vehicles may need a new engine or major failure at excessive age for mileage. EVs are starting to require batteries at a rate far sooner. What are dealers to do to protect themselves from that, battery cost? I mean, I know that there's not a lot of discussions around cost on EV batteries. There have been for hybrids and PHEVs for quite a while. What is a dealer going to do to protect themselves from the fact that maybe they put a car out there without an extended warranty before Brent talked to them, or, in certain markets where there isn't an extended warranty? For example, I did the research in the Canadian market. I think the only warranty covers up to a maximum of $4,500. And really there was a lot of caveats on that warranty, which basically means it's not covered. What should a dealer do to protect themselves?
On coming to Canada, by the way. Shameless plug.
Pardon, sorry, what?
We are actually actively working on coming to Canada.
Rock and
so
roll.
thankfully,
Yeah, there's definitely a need. I did the research on the warranties out there. The only one that covers anything has a lot of caveats, and I think the max coverage is one time $4,500, and there's a lot of exclusionary language, which basically means it's not covered. Pretty much.
That's pretty bad. Yeah. Can I speak to one thing? I'm sorry, I don't want to hog the show.
Yeah.
What I would say for a used car dealer, first and foremost, is understand the battery and drive motor warranties of the vehicles that you're looking to take in, okay? Rivian has a 10-year battery warranty or 150,000 miles. Tesla has an 8-year unlimited miles until 2018, at which it was 8 years, 150,000 miles for S and X, 120K for 3 and Ys. So if you know the battery and drive unit warranty of the cars that you're looking at taking in trade, basically be choosy. I mean, if somebody brings you a 2014 Model S, just decline. I mean, unless you're able to really get a good solid handhold of what kind of range that car has, or unless you're able to take it to a supercharger and charge it up and, and get a good solid feel for it, I honestly wouldn't take it. But if you understand the warranties that the manufacturer gives and you take cars in trade that are still within battery and drive unit warranty, then it's just a matter of getting a good solid evaluation on it once you take it in. Because if the car has less than 70% capacity, Tesla will replace the battery. So getting a good handhold on exactly what the warranty is and knowing that you can take that car in for a replacement battery, if somebody's trying to give you off their dog is a good thing to know.
Fantastic. Joe is back. Joe, any comments on this? He's muted.
And so many comments, but honestly, Brent's on top of it. I think, at the end of the day, you got to start to look, we can't treat EVs like there's some kind of special weird thing. There's some markets in the United States where the EVs are 30% of all new vehicle sales. They're more than 50% of non-truck sales already. This idea that you can look at the central states or the central provinces or colonies or whatever the hell you have up in Canada. And, you can look at that and say, yeah, well, these people haven't bought them yet. They're not buying them yet. That doesn't matter. You're talking about 20% of the new car market. You have to be aware of what's going on. You have to be aware of what's there. And you have to stop treating it like it's some kind of, novelty. It may be new to you, but like, this is our business. It's our job to know our business. We got to get on top of it. And the number one thing that Brent said is you have to understand the warranty. There's nobody on this call, I don't think, who doesn't understand that you need to, if somebody rolls in with a Cummins diesel or a Duramax or something like that, you need to understand that the warranty and the powertrain is going to be a little bit different than regular gasoline. Back then, 10 years ago, Honda was making compressed natural gas cars. You can still get flex fuel Chevrolets and Ram trucks. You need to understand all of that if you're going to buy it and keep it and inventory it and sell it. And if it's too big of a question mark and you don't have the tools necessary to service it, you wholesale it, or you don't take it on trade, or you tell the customer to take it to CarMax or Moose Max or whatever you guys have. You got to stop treating it like it's some kind of magical thing. And there's a statistic that I've been sitting on waiting for this show. I actually had it last week, but I back-pocketed it. There's something, Walmart published a survey that said something like 27% of Americans said that they would never, ever consider buying an EV. And if you go back in time to 2007, damn near the exact survey came out from AT&T that said they would never buy a smartphone. And every single one of those 27% of those people that said they would never buy a smartphone has a smartphone today. So let's not even entertain this concept that these EVs are going away, man. This is what's happening.
I don't know, man. I think Cricket's doing really well at the moment.
Yeah, I think the flip phone's coming back. Maybe the BlackBerry's coming back. Who knows? Well, it's funny in that video that we played initially the show, Jay Leno was talking about the adoption of cars from horses. And he was also talking about the fact that the amount of manure that was being dumped on the road every day when horses were prevalent was kind of interesting. But more importantly, he said the electric cars are the savior of the classic car because classic cars don't make sense sitting on highways in any universe. So I thought that was really interesting, but more importantly, he talked about in the video, the interview, a little bit about sort of the adoption of these things over time. And we actually had the privilege to interview Brian Benstock talking about airbags and ABS. And I think the same thing is true when you look at electric cars. It will be a portion of the market. How much, how soon, we don't know, but it definitely will be a portion of the market. So that means as a used car dealer or even a new car dealer, if you're taking in trade-ins, you've got to do your homework and know the warranty. But more importantly, don't miss an opportunity to sell an extended warranty, because if you don't, it will bite you sooner or later, because that customer will say, hey, I wasn't even offered the warranty. Like they were just hoping it didn't break, which is crazy town. Why don't we go with Ken on this? What do you think, Ken?
I would really echo what Brent and Joe brought up. Joe brought a good point. And as part of our aim of EV friendly is let's take the voodoo out of these EVs. And that's really what we aim to do. At the end of the day, it's just, they're different. It's just understanding. And as Brent said, do your research. As a dealer, there's no substitute for that. And then you're just going to have to make that business decision whether or not you take that car or tell the customer no. That's all I can really add at this point. In terms of the future warranties, that'll be interesting. Certainly to see how that evolves. I think when you're selling them, your best guarantee against liability, and Jeff alluded to it, is communicate effectively with the customer, get them to sign. The old days of as is, that doesn't cut it at all. Get them to acknowledge these things and initial, not just tell them, but actually write it out and have them initial. And at the end of the day,
Yeah, I mean, when you look at technicians years ago, when they were just inspecting used cars or even new cars, I think there's going to be a huge demand. I'm sure Larry can speak to this, as can everyone else. I mean, you're going to need an expert or probably multiple experts on your technician crew, the people inspecting your cars, who can not only inspect electric cars, but can really give you the sense of whether this is something you should even be retailing. And I think that's a thing that also probably expands to used car managers or even salespeople, where as they're evaluating a car, they got to get a lot better at making a good decision here. It's not like, as we did a show a couple weeks ago about appraising, you can't appraise these things over the phone or from your desk. You actually got to do the homework on these cars. I mean, that the value is there in terms of what that value is, but also if you don't have the tools, that's a mistake in my opinion.
Hey, Ian.
Yeah.
Ian, you, it's not just the service, it's the whole front end. It's the idea that if you're ignorant of the EVs, you're going to freeze up, the customer's going to freeze up. And as soon as we start educating the front and the back end of the dealership, it'll be better. Because like Joe said, they're not going away. I'm not a believer that we're going to have the adoption rate that my government anyway thinks we're going to have. But they're definitely not going away, and to be ignorant of the sales end, the service end, all it's going to do is hurt you, turn off customers, and cut off the profit center.
100%. Peter had a question. He had his virtual hand up.
Well, it's kind of a statement. As you well know, I'm very experienced in the EV world as a 5-time Tesla owner, as well as being in the mining industry as well, and retail automotive industry. I honestly believe that there is going to be a strong used car market for EVs, because the adoption rate will be saturated once the critical minerals hit basically their optimum mining capabilities, which is going to be probably, I'd say in the next 2 years, you'll be at mass production, because in Canada, we need to open up 450 mines per year to reach capacity, and it takes 20 years for permitting for a mine to open. So we're going to be in companies like Larry's partner and the BEV, John Ellis, where you're going to have people tearing down battery packs and rebuilding them, because you just won't get the mining capacity out of graphites. So I think the used car market is going to be much larger than the actual new car adoption rate, because they're just not going to be able to produce them. That's just what I see from experience in the mining industry.
That's pretty strong, and that points out a big problem. If it takes 20 years to open a mine in Canada and 20 minutes to open one in China, why do you think they're eating our lunch?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Even in Australia, it's quicker to open a mine for
yeah. So I actually had mines in Australia, and I had mines in Canada, and we dealt with mines in China. And China controls about 80% of the graphite industry, and graphite being one of the primary components of a lithium-ion battery. There's about 330 pounds of graphite in a Tesla battery. It's massive, and when you figure that anytime China or Canada went to open up a mine, China dropped the value of the commodity, and so it made it inefficient to open up the mine. And so it just kept on. Every time we got a little bit stronger, they dropped the price, and that's why I got out of it.
Peter, there's good news though for you and Brett. The reason there's so much bureaucracy is China is basically a dictatorship. And luckily for the EV market, America and Canada are moving towards having dictators, as evidenced by our current leader. So who knows where we're going to
go. Always controversy, Larry. Always controversy.
Oh, and also we had a comment from LinkedIn from Joe Kramer. They said he's going to be opening a wholesale site for EVs soon. So you may want to take a look at that if you're buying used cars. Joe Kramer from LinkedIn, and that's Kramer. And thanks for that comment, Joe. Go ahead, Jeff.
So, our major sponsor of our show is Rapid Recon, and they smooth out reconditioning processes for dealers. And I'm sure they're hearing things from dealers about what do we do on EVs. And so, what are the reconditioning options? But something that popped into my mind while we're talking, I say no. So before anybody laughs at me, Is there any validity in sourcing a battery from a wrecker, or will they just not allow it? Brent?
Well, it depends on the wreck, first off. I mean, Teslas are notorious for being quick totals, right? If they get T-boned or whatever, and the outer body panel connects, basically touches the inside body of that car, most insurance companies will total it. They'll call it frame damage. But you don't really have frame damage there. What you have is a pretty bad accident. Anyways, that battery I would probably source. You got a battery where the whole front end of that Tesla is pushed into the firewall or into the front or whatever you want to call it. I would probably avoid that battery because you've got all these connections within the battery. Every cell has a welded connection at the top, right? And you take a really good hammering of that car, and chances are good that battery is affected. It may not show up today, it may not show up tomorrow, but that battery is going to be affected. Just like, listen, you can fall out of a third-story window and they may put your Humpty Dumpty ass back together, but that doesn't mean you're not going to have problems down the line.
Well, you know what? It's I understand that one. It's funny when we did the starting video there about the fires on Teslas and the anti-EV people, and frankly, Larry, be quiet. But the EVs are very much like politics. There are people that say EVs are the changing of the world, and you've got to do this because look at the fires and look at the seas rising and everything. And the other ones that are saying, you guys are commies. And it's definitely a very weird circumstance, and we are getting extremely political. I personally would be quite nice point, Joe. Joe says they're not here to save the planet, they're here to save the car business.
You should have trademarked that, by the way. You're being ripped off by Bramwell Street there on LinkedIn. You saw that, right?
Oh, dude, it's every day. I had a Google tracker come up every once in a while, and I shut it off because it's depressing. that was from an article I wrote in 2015. So, whatever.
Well, can I speak to the vehicle fires right quick? You can put out a vehicle fire with water, and you can put out a vehicle fire by starving it of oxygen. And there's a company now in Europe that's making these fire blankets that firemen can literally just pull up over the car. They're super heavy duty, fire resistant blankets that basically smother the fire underneath the blanket, robbing it of oxygen, right? So you don't have to put out a vehicle fire with water. As a matter of fact, we're going to see a lot more usage of that in the future because 30,000 gallons of water is just freaking ridiculous. I mean, that's a freaking swimming pool.
Well, the biggest thing that was interesting though about that video wasn't the volume of water. It was the fear from the firemen themselves, but exposure. But the thing that was really interesting for me was back when I sold hybrids, that firemen were just as concerned about hybrids. So a lot of that is education, but also they're like, well, if I'm exposed to this, I could be poisoned. So that was the big issue from the video. That happened to be an Australian video, but I just thought it was an interesting exploration. I'm not saying it's 100% factual, but it was definitely interesting.
You're more likely to be poisoned from the burning plastic inside that car than the burning battery. But nevertheless, putting water on a battery fire is kind of silly. Smothering that fire is a lot smarter.
Okay.
Is that like bringing a knife to a gunfight?
Basically, yeah. It's like taking a gunfight.
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, sorry. I just add to that, Brent. One of the real problems with the battery fires is the reignition. So once they go into the thermal runaway, even though they're extinguished, they can reignite 24, 48, even up to 30 days later. So a real problem has occurring with the towing recovery. As firemen come in, they extinguish it. It's now up to the towing company to take that vehicle and safely store it. But that is a real challenge because of the space and the perimeter needed to store it. There's simply not the space, and property is too expensive. So we don't know what we're going to do with that.
And I firmly believe that we're going to be looking at, just with fires around the world now, forest fires, etc. I think we're going to be looking at a real push in technology, because I know I can't remember what it is, but there is a product out there that you can throw on something and it just starves of oxygen right away. But that great point there too, Brent, about the fire side of things is the blankets have always been a quicker way to put out fires than water. But Ken, I'm going to ask you. So your side of the business is creating this whole infrastructure, or helping to create infrastructure on EV repair. So what for a dealer, and of course the ARA is Automotive Retail Association, not only has repair shops and body shops, which is also a factor with you, right, Peter? And but there is the reconditioning for dealers. So what are the options?
Some really good question. So I'd first point out, because you brought up the used batteries and the wreckers. So for the dismantling and the recycling industry, EVs are going to pose a real challenge for that industry, especially with the dismantling, because there are far fewer parts that they're going to be able to sell. They're also challenged with the high export of these batteries. And if we're not careful, if we don't implement the right policies, we're going to see that increase. And that's going to add to a whole host of problems as well. For a dealer, certainly buying that used battery is definitely going to be an option when they know that the vehicle they have, or however they tested it, has a very low state of health, yet the vehicle itself has low mileage, it's worth keeping. Let's buy a used battery from the wrecker. That's great, but you're essentially buying a black box because the recyclers or the dismantlers are not yet sophisticated enough to do that testing, to refurbish it. It's not like you can refurbish an engine or a transmission. And even on the rebuild or the remanufacture side, there's a big question mark. One, can it even be done? But two, is the cost and expense. So for instance, Tesla now, they put in a ink glue in their batteries, which makes it almost impossible to get in and start replacing cells. There's apparently some ways of doing it, but if that's the future, that's going to make the repair and the remanufacturing just obsolete. So it's going to be a real challenge for that reconditioning. Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good point, Ian.
Does the fault on the degradation lie on the OEM for having early obsolescence or failing to properly educate the early adopters? I also want to speak to solid state, being that this is sort of where batteries are going. Do you believe that obviously manufacturers selling traditional batteries right now, lithium ion, are really just planning the obsolescence as we move to solid state? Maybe Brent can talk a little bit about that, being that warranties on both will probably be soon to happen.
Well, solid state batteries are the holy grail, just like cold fusion is the holy grail of energy production, right? And Toyota the other day, we're going to come out with a solid state battery. And okay, well, they could do a lot with their big mouths, but they still haven't come out with it. It's not necessarily that solid state batteries don't exist. They do exist. They're just difficult and expensive to produce at volume. And I think once that process begins and once we see volume production of solid state batteries and economies of scale bringing the cost down, you're going to see a sea change, a real shift in EV adoption, because a solid state battery you can charge in no time. So I think, and the power density is amazing. I mean, imagine having a Model 3 that gets 1,000 miles range on a charge, so there's going to be a lot of great advancements in that area over the coming decade. I think we're going to see solid state batteries first in specialty cars like Rimac and all these other kind of high-end cars. Maybe Ferrari, Porsche will dip into it, because they can charge enormous amounts of money for their cars. But sooner or later, the economy of scale is going to bring that to everybody, and I think it's going to be the next really great development in EVs. In the meantime, the lithium-ion batteries that are out there are still going to see, just like the 20-year-old Honda Civics that are out there are still putzing around the road. So people aren't just going to en masse throw out their cars. I think it's going to be a slow, steady transition over to advanced batteries like that.
So you see upgrades also when those are available, like someone upgrading, say, their 10-year-old Tesla with a solid state, for example?
You know what? That's what they told us back in 2015 when I was selling Teslas. They were like, yeah, someday they'll have replacement battery packs and you can bring in your 75 and get a 100 kilowatt hour pack. And nobody's ever doing that because of the price of it. It just doesn't make sense. Why would you spend that kind of money on a 10-year-old car, 8-year-old car, or whatever? So,
right.
end of the day, I think replacement battery packs are good for failed packs, but not good for upgrading. They're still pretty decent.
Joe, you had some comments on this, I see.
Oh man, I'm typing them down there so I don't have to say them. Yeah, I've been writing about this stuff. 2008 was the first time I was published in Popular Mechanics writing about EVs before Tesla had their first car on the road. Actually, a year before Tesla showed the Model S, in fact. They had the Roadster. We can debate that. And solid state batteries have been something that's been talked about a long time. Lithium ion batteries, obviously something that's the most modern thing. Toyota is doing some iron phosphate stuff that's a lot lower cost. Chevron's been sitting on some patents since the late aughts, 08, 09, that they're not doing anything with, that are just sitting in labs in Texas. So I am struggling to see that as the future thing. I have a lot more confidence in stuff like University of Purdue, things like Ford are doing. On the experimental side, they've had fast chargers that are pushing 100 kilowatts of electricity in under 5 minutes, which is less time than it takes to usually go in. If I have to go inside and pay with a card at a gas station, I'm there for 10 minutes anyway. So I think that we're going to see more technology on that side. We're going to see more capacitive stuff. We're going to see better regenerative braking and things like that. I wouldn't hold my breath for solid state batteries, but hey, I didn't think Tesla would get the Model 3 out the door, so I've been wrong before. Do what you will with that.
Hey, Joe, isn't it logical to assume that if there's a profit to be made, somebody's going to step in, right? Nature abhors a vacuum. Car people really abhor a vacuum. If there's a way to make money and there's the demand, somebody's going to do it. There's people working on it right now as we're on the show.
Oh, 100%. And I think, Larry, that's a really good point. Right now, the profitability is so much more on the side of internal combustion because the manufacturers don't have to support the entire customer life experience. And one thing that Tesla did and Elon did early on, which none of the manufacturers yet have been willing to do, is he had, and you can bleep this out in the edit, Elon had the balls to go out and build his own charging network. He had the stones to go out and develop his own software and his own app and everything else, and really came at this from a customer experience point of view to ensure that, well, nobody's going to buy my car if there's no fueling network. I'm going to build my own fuel network. Nobody's going to, go to the fueling network if they don't have the confidence to be able to find it. I got to build my own finding app. None of these things have happened. And if you look at all the manufacturers, whether it's Ford, Volkswagen, Nissan, General Motors, none of them have kind of taken that on yet and said, we are going to build this out and we are going to have, we're going to take ownership of the entire customer experience from the first time the customer goes to the website, to inquiry, to the buying process, to the service, all of that. They farm off everything that they can. And there's all these, and we are in this middleman sort of place where, as dealers, we're between the manufacturer and we're between the customer. But the manufacturers are wisening up, and you're starting to see things like Polestar. You're starting to see other brands like Rivian come out, and they're looking at the money that's being made by the dealers. They're looking at the money that's being made by the gas stations and the service centers, and they're looking at the money being made by the tire companies. And they're figuring out that, we've avoided all that out of convenience for the last 60, 70 years. But that's money being made, and it should be our money. And you're starting to see this idea of the dealership becoming a service center or delivery center start to take hold. Once their transition to delivery center take place, it's real easy to just take on service as well. So I think it's a challenge, right? And the dealerships need to keep doing what you and I always talk about. The dealerships need to keep building those human relationships, because if they keep commoditizing their customers, they're going to be the ones who end up commoditized.
Joe, keep in mind that Elon started a little while ago, and the OEM started 100 years ago. And by the way, I did talk to Jeff Polo about the screening. It is okay to say balls if we're talking about Musk, just not about politicians. That goes back to your early comment.
Yeah,
well,
but
thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, what amazes me as you look at gas stations as a model, and a lot of people in the car business started oil and gas, is that they haven't, as a group of manufacturers or retailers or even, owned by dealers or even manufacturers really got together and said, hey, we've already got that footprint. We just need to add these stations. I mean, I think you're going to see that. I mean, I've seen some stations here, but, as you get more vehicles, it makes sense to just add electric charging. I mean, I don't know why
And
they
excuse
have done
me, just my opinion, I could be wrong. I think it needs to start more with the dealerships than the stations. And I think then they'll fall in line. Because the dealerships, it's the old, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? If you have the capacity and make it easy to charge these vehicles, right? It's the old thing, the guys in service, hey, while you're sitting there, let's go look at some cars. I think once that adoption becomes clearer, I think you'll see the stations move in line. Do you agree, Joe?
I don't know, man. I've seen, out in Arizona, I've seen that play out a couple times now, out in Gilbert, Arizona, Chandler, there's a couple of Porsche dealers that have tried that idea where guys will come in and plug in their Taycans and, they'll make it open so people can come in and plug in their Teslas and hang out at the lounge. And maybe I'm there at the wrong times, but I never see anybody hanging out in the lounge or in the coffee area. Maybe they're all looking at cars. I don't know, but
Listen,
I love the car business and I love cars and I don't hang out at car dealerships.
Joe, point, counterpoint, and I'm not being a smart aleck. Would you rather hang out at a dealership or at a gas station? So it's
100%, 100%. But the option isn't that, right? The option is I can plug it in at Target and go do my grocery shopping for an hour and a half, or I can plug it in at Whole Foods and go in and plug it in there, or I can plug it into AMC and go in and watch Barbie for the 23rd time.
Targets and Whole Foods fall in line with what we just discussed with Elon Musk. They're not 100-year-old companies, but are companies that think along modern philosophies.
Oh, so I thought I understood that backwards. I thought you were saying they've been around for 100 years. They kind of know what you're doing, but you're saying that the legacy, the inertia is actually preventing them from pivoting. I see that. Okay.
Listen, you and me are on a rowboat and you say we're going the wrong way. You turn your oar, I turn my oar. If we're on a giant freight liner, it ain't that easy to turn around. And these big companies are so entrenched.
Yeah.
Listen, I was a
and the unions won't let them turn it around.
Correct. I was a Cadillac dealer. We used to love to say it, to talk about General Motors behind their back. It's ready, fire, aim. So they're so used to doing things, we'll build it, you'll buy it. That the idea of getting them, Musk didn't come from that thing. Musk's thing is like, why not? Why can't we do it?
Yeah, and I would say even cities and states.
One thing about a question that I have here that just kind of brought up is, at what point in time are people going to be given time limits on these chargers? You go to,
They are.
The chargers. There's hundreds. Like I know one mall out here, and we're not that big into it. There's got to be 40 superchargers lined up. There's 40 Teslas, and now there's like 3 others sitting there with 6 people in Teslas waiting their turn. And if somebody's gone into the movie theater to watch Barbie for the 23rd time, what's going to happen, right?
If your car is finished, after 5 minutes, they start charging you $1 a minute. That's an expensive freaking movie if you're going to sit in there for 60 minutes after your car. Most people aren't that stupid. Your app says that charging.
Frank, you're 4 million miles ahead of me technically, and so is Joe. But think about it. Somebody's got to be sitting there thinking, people that can afford a heavy duty car, expensive, are not into waiting. They get pissed if it takes 10 extra seconds for their computers to boot up. That's why I think somebody's going to find a way to make this move a little quicker, just because of what the market's going to demand.
I had a friend of mine, his dad owned 12 gas stations, and he had more money than God. And I'll tell you what, he said that money's not in the gas, it's in the liquor and the lotto.
Yeah.
And so when people start figuring out that these are places that people are sitting around for 20 minutes and they get a compelling reason to go inside, like Pizza by the Slice is now $1.25 for the next 5 minutes, and everybody goes in there and gets Pizza by the Slice and picks up a $3 Coke while they're in there as well. The money is inside the store, it's not at the pump. And whoever makes a compelling charging experience, who maybe puts it in a strip mall where you've got a Chinese place here and a nail salon there and a pizza joint there, and you can basically, and every one of them's got a flashing light at the window, supercharger special, next 5 minutes. You're going to drag people in there and they're going to spend money in your store. They're not going to sit there and play video games.
Yeah, Brent, I love you. My wife likes to go to yard sales. I hate them. And she drags me into one. I'll never forget it. I bought a record for $1. Yeah, a record. I'm not old. I have a record player. It was how to sell anything. And I thought, this is going to be hysterical. The guy said one thing I'll never forget. He said, whatever you advertise, you're going to attract. In other words, if you have a deli for 32 years and you put a barber pole up front, somebody's going to knock on your door and say you give haircuts. So it's just a matter of being proactive to the market rather than reactive and say, gosh, it's a shame you're all waiting. I think you're 100% right.
I have to say something though, Joe. This Porsche dealer with the EV charger, blowing the opportunity. If it was me, and it's not, and I don't have a $22 million store with with $10 million net just lying around, I'd put up 10 chargers. I'd put a big sign out front, free coffee at EV charging. And you let somebody pull in and you make sure you've got the Tesla plug in. I don't care how you do it. I don't know, Greg, you probably say you can't. That's fine. I would do that and have people come in, sit down, have a cappuccino. What the heck? Because that Model S driver is going to walk over to your Taycan and they're going to look at it. If you have that in a mainstream car, if you're a Hyundai store, yes, you don't have cars to sell. But if you're a mainstream brand and you have free EV charging, and they're starting to charge here in BC, there's controversy because the electricity provider wants to change charging from kilowatt hour on the public stations to by the minute, and some people are upset about it because they can't drive these things for next to nothing. However, could you imagine the opportunity for a dealer if they had a bank of chargers? Now we can't have 20 superchargers. It doesn't matter. A bank of chargers, and you can stop and get a car and get a free coffee. And for those guys whose wives are going shopping at Target, they can go into there and look at cars.
Ken, any thoughts on this?
Let me just interject for 1 second, guys. Yeah. In my local area, the Audi dealership took up approximately 30% of its forecourt with new charging stations. So they're drawing everybody with their charging stations. The Porsche dealership across the highway from them, they have an L-shaped parking lot. One whole side of their parking lot is chargers. That's all it is, and you cannot park there. It's next to impossible to get a parking spot in the Porsche dealership unless you have an electric car. So yes, the dealerships are adopting that model in Ontario because it makes sense to them to create that captive market that people are going to be in there, and they want them to come see their latest, greatest legacy EV.
Yeah.
No question. Jeff, we're almost out of time, but Ken hasn't said anything in a minute. Maybe he has something to add.
It's been interesting just listening here. Look, it's going to take a long time before we have an adequate charging infrastructure. It's not going to happen overnight. And I'll bring up a little historical for you. The first gas station in Canada opened up in 1908. It's actually here in Vancouver. It was just a guy with a barrel of gas and a hose. He used to siphon it out. It took a long time before gasoline stations started to pop up all over the province. And even when they did, they were only open 9 to 5. Very unknown fact. Gas stations weren't profitable to be open 24/7. So all along the roads, right up until the 1950s, a gas station was only open 9 to 5. So when you went on your road trip, if you weren't there at 5 o'clock, you either stayed a night at a hotel or you slept on the side of the road. And it was like that even in Vancouver up until 1951. So it's just some things. I don't certainly have all the answers and all the solutions, other than it's not going to be done overnight, and it's going to be the biggest. It's the cost and convenience is sort of the biggest holdback to growth of EVs, in my opinion.
Thanks for that.
So,
yeah, I mean, when you look at parking meters, to pick a random city opportunity, I mean, I think there's a huge opportunity, being that most people are using apps to pay for parking, but just think about a percentage of the parking meters turning into revenue for a city. I mean, that's a huge, huge thing. Plus, those things are there anyway, but I don't know what it would take to do that. But any final thoughts from anybody? Because we're kind of out of time. Go ahead.
Nobody
Well,
wants to
I have a final thought if nobody else does.
Actually, I find as soon as I talk, somebody's got an idea, so that's good. Great point. You know, EVs basically, they are the reason that people get upset about EVs is the same reason that we're upset about all sorts of stuff. It is still an unknown thing. We just don't know what it is. We have bad experiences. You know, people talk. When we talked about the fire thing, how many people did you hear say, well, I don't wear seatbelts because what if I go flying off a cliff and I want to jump out of my car and I can't get it undone? So same thing here. How many fires are there to the cars on the road? Very few. Seatbelts. Can you imagine that? The chance of getting hurt in a car accident is like in lots higher than an EV fire. And I just worry about sitting in traffic and just starting to sweat from the battery overheating. That's all.
Well, then don't drive a Leaf because Teslas actually have temperature controlled batteries, so you're fine. You can sit in traffic for an hour in a Tesla and not lose a couple of miles.
Well, Brent, I could take it or leave it.
Oh!
So I have to say something here. My daughter got married in the weekend, and I'm talking like Rod Stewart right now, but it was one of the most magical times of my life. And the reason I said that is just because I was the MC and I was making dad jokes the whole time. So every guest had to roll their eyes at least once every 5 minutes. So
nice.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Brent, as always, and you're looking good, buddy. You know, you're looking like some fashion model now, man. You got to develop the blue steel look on virtual meetings. All the best, everybody.
Have a great week.
Take care.
Thank you.
You guys.
Oh la. What?
Thanks for joining us. It was a great show, and follow us anywhere you would like on your favorite podcast, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and of course on our YouTube, or subscribe to our own channel.
And